Hey, it's Mama E again. Let's continue my journey. I talked about using this period of the pandemic to just kind of reflect on what life for a 72-year-old black woman born in the South was like. Okay, so let me continue. I talked about being born in Florida and the fact that I attended segregated schools, but it was the norm. So again, before you think, oh, poor Mama E, no. Because of how we were raised and because of the culture during that time, it made us very strong individuals. It's amazing to me sometimes how we were able to survive all of the injustice. I remember clearly catching the bus to go downtown, and I remember the color water fountain. I remember getting a hot dog at Grant's. It was one of the best hot dogs because the bun was toasted, but we had to get our hot dog on the end of the counter. My uncle used to be a bellhop at a hotel downtown, and so we could always go, and if he was working, he'd give us a quarter. So there were things about that period. I think, the Bible says, in whatever state I find myself, I learned to be content. We didn't know any other life. Even though it was not fair, and even though there were people who benefited from keeping us down, God allowed us to make the best of the situation we were in. Not because we were going to have to stay there. We were in bondage for the time, but we knew that God would deliver us. And therefore, my father was a barber, and people would barter. They'd bring him fish when they went fishing in exchange for him cutting their hair. Every time somebody went hunting, they'd bring Daddy a rabbit, a squirrel, or whatever. I hate that stuff, but it was at least, and when I think about even the fact that blacks, African Americans, because we were poor, we learned to make something good out of nothing. I can remember my mom making handkerchiefs and putting the lace around it, and she'd earn money for doing that. I can remember blacks in the neighborhood having card parties, and they would sell fish dinners at the party, and they'd make money. So what do they say? Oh goodness, something about the opportunity creates an environment. In other words, when you don't have, you learn how to be creative and to make something out of it. And so I never think, it was just horrible growing up in those times. It was not necessarily all good. It wasn't everything it could have been, but an awful lot of good came out of that. I can remember after I must have been in high school. In fact, I'm sure it was. And I remember at the end of the school year, we used to turn in our books for, I guess, the next class coming along the next year. Anyway, I remember going through one of my books, and in the front of it, it was stamped Property of Andrew Jackson High School. And even 60 years later, I remember thinking, I don't go to Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson is a white school. It wasn't until much later that I figured out, I deduced that we got the leftover books from the white school. So some 10th grader at Andrew Jackson had that book last year, and they were perhaps getting new books. So the black students at New Stanton got those books. And it caused me to wonder how much of that actually goes along. How much of that still goes on. I remember my dad taking us to Silver Springs. That was one of the things that I applaud him for, was always trying to expose us and give us experiences. So we went to Silver Springs. I didn't know until much later that the part of Silver Springs that we went to, it was actually called Paradise Park. That was the black Silver Springs. I don't know how, if the springs were any different in the black part that black people could see. I don't know that the boats, because they advertised having glass bottom boats so that you could look down and see the fish. I don't know if those boats were left over. I don't know. I just didn't realize that there was a black part and there was a white part. I remember Dad taking us, one of our treats was to go to the beach or to the zoo on Sundays. And our trip to the beach, Daddy would only take us to Little Talbot Island because it was family oriented. And there was no drinking and whatever there. And of course that was before we could go to Jacksonville Beach. So going to Little Talbot Island, I never knew that there was a Big Talbot Island. Now, what's funny, well maybe not funny, ironic, is that it is the same ocean that ran through Little Talbot Island as Big Talbot Island. Tell me how stupid that was, that as if some of the black off us would rub off in the Atlantic, and so therefore keep it separate because the white folks are going to be at the Big Talbot Island, and you all stay in your place and stay at Little Talbot Island. All of those were lessons that I learned as I grew up, because I think God maybe shielded us from the pain of knowing too much when we couldn't handle it. You know, I often say to my couples in marriage class that there are things that children aren't equipped to handle. And so good parents just kind of protected us. They didn't let us find out too much. Back then, of course, kids were not allowed to sit around when grown people were talking. So the things that they experienced and that they were going through, we didn't know about it. So we didn't know getting a hot dog on the end of the counter. Was it a different hot dog, a different bun? I don't know. We knew that Hemming Plaza, which housed all the Confederate statues and all of that, there were things that our parents just didn't let us know. They were our balm in Gilead. They protected their children from the ills of the society in which we lived. And so I've said in every one of these sessions that even though it was not good, it was not the best that it could be, God took what they meant for evil and turned it for good. So when I share with my white friends, and I do have, believe it or not, even though I'm just letting the fire extinguisher be opened up, so in light of all of what is happening now, somebody that you know in the flesh can tell you that it's real. I often say to them, please don't try to write my story. Don't say to me that you understand. And when I hear statements like we've heard so much lately about all lives matter, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in another session. But a good example that I can give you of why that's inappropriate, I'm a breast cancer survivor. And when I say that, even people who never had breast cancer have empathy. They don't say, oh, I know exactly how you feel. Or what they don't say is, well, that wasn't so bad. Nor do they say, aren't you lucky that you lived? So can I caution those of you who are wrestling now with what do we do with this? I'm giving you a heart-to-heart. Just reach way down in your soul and find that part of your soul that's empathy. God gave it to you for a reason. So this is probably a good time to pull it out and try to use it. Don't say, well, I didn't have breast cancer, but I had colon cancer, so understand that we don't have to try to compete over whose struggle was worst. My saying that mine was bad doesn't take anything away from yours. But if in this season it has been brought to the forefront of the world, ask yourself, or maybe ask God, what is it that you want us to get from this experience that the whole world is seeing? What can we learn from it? We're going to continue talking a little bit later. This has been Mama E, and we'll talk real soon.